If you've been watching the news or reading the newspapers for the past 2 months or so, you might think that Democrats have been doing an incredible job handling the coronavirus and the Republicans have completely botched it, President Trump specifically. But that's not true. Many Democrats have not handled it well, and many of them didn't even take it seriously for quite a long time. That's what I'm going to show in this video. I'm also going to address and debunk 2 common claims about Trump and his response, but that'll be a little bit later, so make sure you hang around until the end. Many Democrats have done very poor jobs. And the one who most epitomizes that, in my opinion, is Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York. He directed nursing homes to accept COVID-19 patients. So if you were released from a nursing home to go to the hospital and you were recovering from COVID-19, he required the nursing home from which you came to readmit you, even though you could still be contagious. He argued that nursing homes have, quote, no right to reject coronavirus patients. He also said they don't have a right to object. That is the rule and that is the regulation, and they have to comply with that. Now, after quite a bit of pushback and doing this for months at a time, they finally decided maybe sending contagious people to nursing homes is not a good idea. And so, May 11th, they finally decided to reverse that policy. Cuomo said, "We're not going to send a person who is positive to a nursing home after a hospital visit, period." But he just did that for almost 2 months. It's only changed because he started being criticized for it. Not only were nursing homes required to readmit people who had coronavirus, they were also prohibited from testing patients before they were admitted. So they had no idea if you had coronavirus until you were already in the nursing home, which is just a completely ridiculous policy. By all available evidence, the coronavirus dramatically hits those who are older quite a bit harder. And so this policy was a great way to ensure that even more older people got the coronavirus. Now, Cuomo doesn't take responsibility for this. He's trying to push the blame onto Trump. He said, what New York did was to follow what the Republican administration said to do. Don't criticize the state for following the president's policies. At this point, I want to compare and contrast Andrew Cuomo's response to what Florida Governor Ron DeSantis did. What he decided to do was the exact opposite. He prohibited patients who were recovering from coronavirus and still had coronavirus from being admitted to nursing homes, which is a logical policy. And as a result, Florida saw 1/7 of New York's death rates when it comes to the coronavirus in nursing homes. Overall, their death rate is significantly better than New York. Even though they have a very comparable population to New York State, Florida saw less than 1/10 the deaths of New York State. And yet, Governor Cuomo is being consistently praised by the media as if he's doing this fantastic job, while DeSantis from Florida is being criticized, even though, again, by any measurement, he's doing significantly better than New York. There's another policy that I feel like Governor Cuomo completely botched, and that is, quite simply, the cleaning of the subway system. You see, even though they enacted their stay-at-home order and their quarantine in mid-March, they didn't decide to shut down and deep clean the subways until the beginning of May. Almost 2 months into the coronavirus, they finally thought, you know what, maybe we should actually clean the subway system. It's not like having a ton of people in one small enclosed area underneath the ground is going to help spread the coronavirus, right? They're going to shut down the subway system every night from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. so they can deep clean and disinfect all the subway cars, which again is a good policy. They should have been doing that from the beginning. This is a huge oversight in my opinion. You cannot have public transportation that is not cleaned on a regular basis in the middle of a pandemic. Especially, as I said, if that public transportation is underground and not open to the air. Now, it's not entirely fair to blame everything that happened in New York on Governor Cuomo. You see, Mayor Bill Deblasio was also handling this very poorly. Bill Deblasio did not want to close down schools or gyms or public things like that, and I understand why. You want to keep people living their lives as normal as possible, and I get that. But eventually, he did decide to close down the schools and the gyms. And yet, the same day they were supposed to close, he went to the YMCA where he could work out. They have a really good quote here from The Atlantic. It says, "Here was de Blasio clinging to his own routine just hours after ordering millions of New Yorkers to abandon their own in the name of public health." Now, I do want to point out, at that point the gyms were not closed, so he wasn't violating his own order. However, it makes no sense to close all of the gyms and schools because you think it's not safe, and then still go to the gym. Either it is safe and you can go, or it's not safe and you shouldn't go. Now, Bill Deblasio tried to defend himself, but he failed quite miserably. He said, "I need exercise to be able to stay healthy and make decisions." So apparently, Bill Deblasio needs to exercise more than the millions of Americans who can't, because he needs to stay healthy and make decisions. But if you want to go to the gym, or if you want to go to school, that doesn't matter. Only Bill Deblasio has that right. As one last example of the failings of both of these individuals, I want to highlight the story of one woman who flew into New York City. She was tested positive for coronavirus only 1 week after she arrived, at which point both Andrew Cuomo and Bill Deblasio said that they would track down everyone else on that flight because that would be really important. If she was contagious on that flight, then hundreds of other people could be as well. And yet, they never did it. This was the beginning of March. If you were really taking this seriously, you think they would have done it. They would have followed up, but that didn't happen. These reasons, among others, are why New York had become the epicenter of this epidemic. Now, it's also true they have a very dense population, and that certainly contributes. But it would have helped if your leaders actually cared about what they were doing, if they had closed down nursing homes better, if they had tracked people who were on flights who could have been contagious from coronavirus. Before we move away from de Blasio, I also want to point out that on March 3rd, he told people to go about their daily lives, where he invited them to go to the movie theater. But if you were really taking an epidemic seriously, you wouldn't invite people to go to the movies a little less than a week before you then say, you know what, we're closing down. It doesn't work. Either you took it seriously from the beginning or you did not. And here, we can see they didn't. Governor Newsom is another example of someone who didn't really take this as seriously as many in the media are portraying. You see, on March 8th, he allowed the LA Marathon to continue, where they had 27,000 participants. And they were not social distancing because you're in a marathon, you can't really social distance at the beginning. And this comes on the heels of 2 other events in Southern California being postponed or canceled. So it's not like nothing else had been canceled, he just chose to continue with the LA Marathon, which drew an extraordinarily large crowd. So don't tell me that he was being careful with the pandemic, because he obviously was not. Similarly, in late February, Pelosi encouraged people and tourists to come out to Chinatown, have a good time because they were safe. Now, this isn't a huge deal. But again, here you have Nancy Pelosi, who is now criticizing Donald Trump and the Republicans for not acting quickly enough. In late February, she is encouraging tourism and encouraging groups of individuals to come together in Chinatown. That is not what you should do in pandemic. You shouldn't bring people together. They need to be socially distancing. And now we have Joe Biden. First off, when the Trump administration announced that they were banning certain travel to and from China, Joe Biden essentially accused it of being xenophobic. That was in late January. However, he has since changed his opinion, and as of April 3rd, actually would have agreed to some sort of China travel ban. Joe Biden had been president, there would not have been any ban, presumably, for an extra 2 months. So they're saying that Donald Trump did not act fast enough, and yet here he is, enacting a travel ban in late January, and Joe Biden didn't come out and say he agreed with it until April 3rd. But it's not only that. Joe Biden also continued to campaign in March, even as the epidemic grew worse in the United States. You see, in March alone, Joe Biden had 8 rallies. 8. And Donald Trump only had 1. And if you've ever been to a rally, you know they can get really populated. There are a lot of people packed in a dense area. His last rally was March 10th in Philadelphia, only a few days before the federal guidelines telling people to socially distance and all of that. So he was not ahead of Trump in this. He was still holding rallies when the pandemic was getting even worse. And yet somehow he gets a pass on that. Now, I couldn't find pictures of that rally specifically, but I did find pictures of his rally for Super Tuesday, and this is what it looks like. Keep in mind, this is March 3rd. There are a lot of people really close together, not socially distancing. This is about 2 weeks before the federal guidelines and the federal shutdown order. So he's not really ahead of the curve here. He's holding these rallies, gathering large groups of people, and not really doing a good job taking the coronavirus seriously. Now, the reason I'm sharing all of these examples is not trying to pivot away from Trump or use whataboutism or anything like that. I'm simply saying that if the media claims, as they have been, that Trump has been doing a very poor job and that Democrats have been doing great, you need to prove that Democrats have actually been doing great, because they haven't. They did not take it seriously at the beginning. Very few people actually did. And even in the middle of the pandemic, many of their policies, like we saw with Governor Cuomo and Bill Deblasio, were actually very hurtful and didn't help whatsoever. Now, as I promised at the beginning, I'm going to look at 2 fairly common claims that I've been seeing regarding Trump and his response to the coronavirus. The first one, and I see this one all the time, is that people think that Trump called the coronavirus a hoax. You see it from articles like this one, or even from CNN, where they say Trump on coronavirus, from hoax to national emergency. The fact of the matter is, though, that's not true. He never called the coronavirus a hoax. And that's not me saying it, that's the Washington Post. And they're not very good friends of Trump, in case you haven't noticed. They gave that claim 4 Pinocchios. Trump never said the coronavirus was a hoax. He did say the way the Democrats were playing up the coronavirus was a hoax, but he never called coronavirus itself a hoax, which is a very big distinction. Now, another thing I've been seeing quite a bit recently is the claim or the belief that Donald Trump knew about the coronavirus all the way back in November. This comes from an ABC News report where they claim that intelligence agencies in China were able to find out about this disease, and they briefed the White House and President Trump by extension all the way back in November. And they said these briefings were important because the disease would pose a serious threat to US forces in Asia. Now, on its face, that looks really bad, but that's assuming you just take their word for it. You see, the director for the National Center of Medical Intelligence, where they claim this report came from, says, as a matter of public practice, we do not publicly comment on specific intelligence matters, which makes sense because they're an intelligence agency. But he continues, in the interest of transparency, we can confirm that media reporting about this is not correct. No such product exists. So this bombshell report that Trump somehow knew about the coronavirus in November is not accurate. The intelligence agency says the report is not accurate and it doesn't exist. But in case that's not enough for you, let's think about this logically. The very first case of the coronavirus we can now see was back in November. So November 17th, there was one person in China who had the coronavirus. Even if you go ahead a full month to mid-December, there were only 27 people who had the coronavirus. So anyone who claims that Trump knew about the coronavirus all the way back in November, he somehow knew about a virus that only a handful of people had. How in the world is our intelligence agency that good? It wasn't until late December that Chinese doctors started being concerned about this and started talking about it. So the intelligence agency in the United States would have had to have known about a disease that, again, less than 30 people had, all the way in China. Even if Trump was informed that he did know about it, what actions would you expect a president to have taken when 30 people were infected with a disease all the way around the world? It doesn't make any sense. So not only did Trump not know about the virus back in November, but even if he did, it wouldn't have made any sense for him to enact ridiculous policies trying to combat it because it was 30 people in China. It wasn't an immediate threat to the United States back then. Obviously it is now, but with hindsight, everything is 2020. Now, to make myself clear, I'm not saying that Donald Trump or his administration is above criticism with regard to the coronavirus response, because they certainly are not. But what I am saying is that it's not accurate to say that Democrats have taken this seriously from the beginning and that they have been the ones treating this properly, whereas Republicans have been botching it, because none of that is accurate. I mean, we did see Florida is doing significantly better than New York. One is a Democrat, one is a Republican. And one of them was pushing sick people back into nursing homes, so take your pick. This was a bit of a long one, but I hope it's been beneficial to you. Be sure to leave a like or a comment just to help out the algorithm and help me promote this video. Thank you for watching this video, especially if you stuck all the way to the end. Make sure you check out some of my other videos. Maybe you haven't seen them yet. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.